It started with a glance, a fleeting electric moment that neither Emma nor Lucas could ignore. In the quiet corridors of the university library in 2018, their eyes met, and the world seemed to shrink around them. There was something dangerous in the air, an unspoken promise that drew them together despite the boundaries etched by morality, friendship, and circumstance. The air between them crackled with tension, and the thought that a simple touch could ignite forbidden desires made Emma's pulse race uncontrollably. Sound cue. Whispered heartbeat. Disclaimer. This is a dramatic content for awareness and discussion only. Emma had always been careful, the embodiment of virtue in her close-knit family, yet the thrill of the unknown, the magnetic pull of Lucas, made her question everything she believed about love, temptation, and loyalty. Lucas, charming and enigmatic, had a way of making her feel seen, special, and dangerous all at once. In 2018, in New York City, where ambitions collided with hidden desires, this unlikely connection began to blur the lines between right and wrong. Every meeting, every exchanged smile, carried the weight of secrets that could shatter lives. Visual highlight. Dim library with sunlight streaming through dusty windows. From the very first conversation, Emma felt it. A deep, undeniable attraction that whispered of forbidden romance. They laughed together, shared fleeting touches that lingered too long, and every innocent interaction became a minefield of temptation. She wrestled with guilt, questioning if desire could ever be worth the consequences, and whether a stolen kiss could define the rest of her life. Lucas, fully aware of the stakes, encouraged the closeness with a mischievous glint, blurring the lines between flirtation and something far more dangerous. The tension reached a crescendo on a rainy October evening, when a late-night study session in the library's secluded corner transformed into a moment of raw emotion. Their hands brushed, eyes locked, and before either could reason, their lips met in a kiss that carried all the passion, secrecy, and recklessness of their hidden attraction. Emma's heart pounded, guilt and exhilaration intertwined. The kiss was brief yet monumental, a spark that promised a fire they couldn't yet control. But every stolen pleasure has its shadow. Rumors began to ripple through their social circles. What started as a single kiss grew into a storm of whispers, curious glances, and moral judgments that threatened to expose the fragile illusion of control they had maintained. Emma, torn between desire and conscience, faced the ultimate question. Was this momentary ecstasy worth risking her reputation, her future, and the trust of those she loved? The lines between passion and recklessness blurred further as Lucas's presence became both intoxicating and dangerous. In secret, their stolen meetings deepened the connection. In public, Emma struggled to reconcile the joy of their moments together with the anxiety of being discovered. Friends began noticing changes in her behavior, discreet smiles, subtle nervous gestures, and an air of secrecy that didn't go unnoticed. Every interaction carried suspense, a tension that could explode at any moment. As their clandestine encounters escalated, the story of a single forbidden kiss became a narrative of emotional turmoil, secret passions, and moral reckoning. Each stolen touch threatened to unravel the delicate fabric of Emma's life, leaving her questioning her own values, boundaries, and the very definition of love itself. Could a single act of desire truly dictate a lifetime of consequences? Could a kiss that felt like heaven also deliver the most devastating hell? And just as Emma began to imagine a future that included Lucas in secret, a figure from her past appeared unexpectedly, one whose knowledge of her previous relationships could shatter the delicate illusion they had carefully maintained. Would the truth come out sooner than they feared? Could this forbidden love survive the mounting pressures of exposure, jealousy, and betrayal? The answer hovered like a shadow over the next chapter of their story, teasing the darkness yet to come. If this story has captured your heart and curiosity so far, kindly comment, "I feel the tension." Share this story with those who need to watch it, subscribe to Taboo Romance Stories TVC, and follow for more emotionally gripping, heartbreaking, and forbidden romance stories. And don't forget to turn on the notification bell, because what happens next will challenge everything Emma believes about love, loyalty, and desire. The storm of secrecy only intensified as Emma and Lucas continued their hidden liaison, each encounter more daring than the last. It was no longer just the stolen kiss that haunted her thoughts. It was the lingering touch of his fingers tracing hers across the tabletop in the library, the whispered promises in corridors where no one else could hear, and the thrill of doing something they both knew was dangerously forbidden. In December of 2018, New York's winter chill seemed to mirror the icy tension that ran between public perception and private desire. Every meeting was a gamble. Every moment spent together was a thread in a tapestry that could unravel at any second. Lucas had a way of seeing Emma that no one else did. When they met in secret, he peeled back the layers she had carefully cultivated over the years, exposing vulnerabilities and desires she had never dared acknowledge. "You're not like everyone else," he whispered one night as rain streaked the windows of the coffee shop where they huddled over hot cocoa. "You're fire, and fire can't be tamed." Emma felt the warmth of his words invade her chest, igniting both exhilaration and terror. She wanted to pull away, to step back and reassert the boundaries her conscience demanded, but her body betrayed her. She was drawn to him like a moth to flame, unable to resist, fully aware of the impending burn. Their secret meetings became a delicate dance of timing and evasion. Text messages disguised as mundane conversations hid the true yearning in their words. Each rendezvous required meticulous planning, from avoiding surveillance cameras on campus to checking for friends or professors who might catch a glimpse of their intimacy. Emma began to experience an exhilarating paranoia, where her pulse would spike at the faintest noise, her eyes constantly scanning for observers, while Lucas's hand lingered too long in hers, sending shivers of forbidden desire through her body. The risk became part of the allure. The thrill of danger amplified the pleasure, and every clandestine encounter reinforced the magnetic pull that neither of them could resist. Yet, the outside world remained oblivious. Friends noticed subtle changes: Emma's distracted smiles, her moments of uncharacteristic nervous laughter, her sudden absences during study sessions, but she deflected all questions with practiced charm. Lucas, equally cunning, maintained a public persona of casual detachment, the perfect mask to protect them both from scrutiny. But the tension of living a double life began to gnaw at Emma. Could passion survive when weighed against morality? And could she endure the inevitable consequences that always follow forbidden love? By January, their secret passion had escalated into something undeniably physical. It was no longer just glances and fleeting touches. Their longing for one another had become urgent, overwhelming. One evening, under the dim glow of a street lamp near the university, they shared a kiss that lasted for minutes, deep and unrestrained. Emma's heart raced as Lucas pressed closer, his hands tracing the contours of her face with a reverence that made her knees weak. Every kiss, every embrace was both intoxicating and terrifying, a heady mix of pleasure, guilt, and fear. She felt as if she were teetering on the edge of an abyss, each stolen moment bringing her closer to a precipice from which there might be no return. But secrecy has a way of unraveling, and the first crack appeared sooner than they expected. A casual acquaintance, someone they had underestimated, noticed subtle interactions, a lingering touch, a stolen glance, and whispered speculations began to spread. The rumor mill churned silently at first, then with increasing momentum, until whispers of Emma and Lucas's closeness reached ears that should never have known. The thrill of secrecy quickly transformed into dread. Emma realized that their private paradise was fragile, teetering on the edge of exposure. The moment of reckoning seemed inevitable. Lucas sensed the tension too, and the chemistry that once fueled excitement now carried an undercurrent of fear. He became more careful, more strategic, but also more magnetic. Every interaction charged with the desperation of knowing the consequences were looming. "We'll be fine," he murmured, eyes intense, brushing hair from her face. "We just have to be smarter." But even as he spoke, the world outside closed in, like shadows creeping across a room, ready to reveal their secret to anyone daring enough to look. Emma wanted to believe him, to surrender to the comfort of his words, yet a knot of anxiety tightened in her stomach. Was it possible for love so intense, so forbidden to survive without destroying everything in its path? One fateful night in February, Emma's fears materialized. At a seemingly innocuous campus event, a mutual friend's unexpected presence caught them in an intimate moment. Eyes widened, whispered gasps followed, and the invisible boundary between secrecy and exposure vanished in an instant. Emma's stomach churned as she saw the disbelief and subtle judgment reflected in faces she had trusted. The thrill of clandestine meetings had given way to panic, the consequences of desire now unavoidable. Lucas grasped her hand, whispering assurances she desperately wanted to believe, yet the fear gnawed at her resolve. Their forbidden romance was no longer safe. Every choice from this point onward carried consequences that neither could escape. Could the love they had nurtured in secrecy survive the scrutiny of the world? Would Emma ever forgive herself for indulging in a desire that society deemed wrong? And more urgently, what would Lucas do when confronted by forces that neither passion nor strategy could deflect? Every heartbeat, every stolen touch, had brought them closer to this moment, where desire collided violently with conscience, and only one path forward remained, one fraught with heartbreak, betrayal, and choices that could define the rest of their lives. Emma's world began to collapse under the weight of rumors, whispers, and mounting suspicion. Emma wanted to believe him, to surrender to the comfort of his words, yet a knot of anxiety tightened in her stomach. Was it possible for love so intense, so forbidden to survive without destroying everything in its path? One fateful night in February, Emma's fears materialized. At a seemingly innocuous campus event, a mutual friend's unexpected presence caught them in an intimate moment. Eyes widened, whispered gasps followed, and the invisible boundary between secrecy and exposure vanished in an instant. Emma's stomach churned as she saw the disbelief and subtle judgment reflected in faces she had trusted. The thrill of clandestine meetings had given way to panic, the consequences of desire now unavoidable. Lucas grasped her hand, whispering assurances she desperately wanted to believe, yet the fear gnawed at her resolve. Their forbidden romance was no longer safe. Every choice from this point onward carried consequences that neither could escape. Could the love they had nurtured in secrecy survive the scrutiny of the world? Would Emma ever forgive herself for indulging in a desire that society deemed wrong? And more urgently, what would Lucas do when confronted by forces that neither passion nor strategy could deflect? Every heartbeat, every stolen touch, had brought them closer to this moment, where desire collided violently with conscience, and only one path forward remained, one fraught with heartbreak, betrayal, and choices that could define the rest of their lives. Emma's world began to collapse under the weight of rumors, whispers, and mounting suspicion. Every corner she turned seemed to carry eyes that watched, judgment in every glance, while Lucas remained her only refuge, the only person who understood the paradox of their love. Yet even he could not shield her from the emotional avalanche that had begun. The secrecy that once fueled their passion now felt like chains, binding her to a life of constant tension and anxiety. In March 2019, the thrill of the clandestine gave way to the haunting realization that love without freedom can be its own form of torment. Lucas tried to reassure her, whispering words that once sent shivers down her spine, but now only felt hollow in the cold glare of suspicion. "We'll survive this," he murmured one rainy evening as they huddled in the shadows of a quiet alley, the sound of water echoing like a distant heartbeat. But Emma's mind was a storm of conflicting emotions: desire, guilt, fear, and an aching need to be honest with herself. How much longer could they dance on the edge of ruin before the truth exploded in their faces? Their meetings became increasingly daring, not out of rebellion but out of desperation. Each encounter was a fleeting escape from reality, a stolen moment where the world's rules could not touch them. They met in empty lecture halls after hours, in dimly lit cafes with curtains drawn, and in hidden corners of city parks where the rustle of leaves became their soundtrack. Every brush of fingers, every lingering gaze, every whispered promise of forever was charged with a tension that bordered on unbearable. Emma found herself laughing nervously one moment, crying silently the next, as the line between love and obsession blurred into a haze she could no longer navigate with clarity. But secrecy is a fragile cocoon, and theirs began to fray. A casual text misinterpreted, a friend who pried a little too far, and suddenly their private world threatened to spill into public exposure. Emma's heart pounded with every ping of her phone, every notification a potential herald of disaster. She could feel the walls of their hidden love tightening, the pressure mounting until it seemed ready to suffocate her. And yet, the pull toward Lucas was magnetic and irresistible. Every stolen touch was an affirmation of their passion, but also a reminder of the consequences that loomed. The breaking point came in mid-April, during what should have been a private celebration of Emma's birthday. Lucas had planned a quiet evening at a rooftop bar far from the prying eyes of friends and family, a space where they could be together without fear. The city lights stretched below them like a glittering promise, the air electric with possibility. Yet as they leaned into each other, savoring the rare moments of intimacy, a shadow fell across their shared bubble. One of Emma's acquaintances appeared unexpectedly, a knowing smile on their face, eyes sharp and curious. Panic seized Emma's chest. Their secret could no longer be contained. The illusion of control shattered in an instant, leaving them vulnerable to scrutiny and judgment. Lucas reacted with instinctive protectiveness, shielding Emma as best he could while trying to defuse the situation. But it was too late. The encounter set off a chain reaction. Rumors, once whispered, now began to ripple outward, carried on the wings of gossip and speculation. Emma felt exposed, her privacy obliterated, and with it, the fragile sense of security their forbidden love had provided. She looked at Lucas, searching for answers, for reassurance, for a plan to navigate the aftermath. But his expression mirrored her own fear and uncertainty. They were both trapped in a web of secrecy, desire, and societal expectations, and there was no clear way out. The days that followed were a crucible of emotion. Emma vacillated between rage, despair, and longing, questioning every choice she had made. Was the kiss she had stolen, the moments she had risked everything for, worth the devastation that now surrounded her? Lucas, for his part, became both her anchor and her storm, his presence comforting, yet suffocating. Every interaction was a reminder of what they had and what they could lose, and Emma realized that forbidden love is not only about the pleasure of the secret, it is also about the unbearable weight of potential loss. And as the tension reached its peak, Emma faced a moment of reckoning. The consequences of their actions were no longer abstract. They had materialized in every sideways glance, every hushed whisper, every silent judgment. Could their love withstand the relentless pressure of the world's scrutiny, or would it crumble, leaving only regret and heartbreak in its wake? The answers remained elusive, like shadows flickering at the edge of a candlelight, and Emma knew that the next decision she made would determine the path of both their lives forever. If this story has gripped you so far, comment, "I feel the tension." Share this story with those who need to watch it. Subscribe to Taboo Romance Stories TVC, and follow for more emotionally gripping, heartbreaking, and forbidden romance stories. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell because Part 4 will expose the consequences of desire, the unraveling of trust, and a revelation that will change everything Emma thought she knew about love and betrayal. The aftermath of exposure was swift and merciless. Emma felt every glance as a judgment, every whisper as a dagger aimed at her heart. The private world she had built with Lucas, the laughter, the stolen touches, the sense of invincibility, had evaporated overnight, leaving her raw and trembling. In May 2019, the city itself seemed to conspire against her. The streets felt narrower, the buildings more suffocating, and the very air charged with the weight of consequence. Lucas, who had once been her sanctuary, now mirrored her own uncertainty, and together they stood at the precipice of a love that had once promised heaven, but now threatened to deliver only pain. The confrontation was inevitable. One evening, after a tense silence that stretched across their favorite quiet cafe, Emma finally demanded honesty. "Lucas, what are we doing? Are we truly in this together? Or am I just chasing a fantasy that will burn me alive?" Her voice was a mix of desperation and determination, each word slicing through the thick tension. Lucas reached across the table, his hand trembling as it covered hers. "Emma, I've never lied about my feelings. I wanted us. I still do. But the world won't let us have what we deserve." His eyes glistened with guilt, remorse, and a longing that mirrored her own. And for a fleeting moment, it seemed the universe had shrunk to the two of them alone, battling an unseen storm. But love in the shadow of secrecy is a fragile construct. Emma began to realize that the very passion that had drawn her to Lucas was also the source of her unraveling. Each stolen kiss, each intimate whisper, had created a rift between her public identity and her private desires. Friends she once trusted now regarded her with suspicion. Family members sensed a shift, a distance that she could not fully explain. And through it all, Lucas remained a constant, his devotion unshaken, but his presence a bittersweet reminder of the consequences of giving in to forbidden temptation. The emotional crescendo reached its peak one evening when they found themselves alone on the rooftop of the old apartment building where their story had first begun. The city sprawled beneath them, lights twinkling like silent witnesses. "Do we end this?" Emma whispered, the wind tugging at her hair, carrying with it the ache of every secret moment, every stolen glance, every risk they had ever taken. Lucas's grip tightened, his thumb brushing against hers, a silent plea to stay. "Emma, we can't pretend anymore. But leaving isn't the same as forgetting. Every moment we shared, every breath we took together, it's ours, even if the world doesn't understand." Tears streamed down Emma's cheeks, and she realized that some loves are not meant to be lived freely, yet they shape every fiber of who we become. The kiss they shared that night was both a farewell and a vow, a moment that encapsulated the heights of joy and the depths of sorrow, the paradox of forbidden love that had given them heaven in private and hell in public. As the skyline shimmered, Emma understood the price of a kiss you shouldn't have taken. It is not merely the exposure or the judgment, but the way it alters your heart, leaves indelible marks, and teaches lessons no one else can impart. Could love survive when secrecy is shattered? Is the thrill of desire worth the devastation it can cause? And as Emma looked into Lucas's eyes one last time, she knew that some questions would remain unanswered, lingering like ghosts in her memory, shaping the woman she was destined to become. If this story has touched you, comment, "I felt the fire." Share this story with friends who need to hear it. Like and subscribe to Taboo Romance Stories TVC for more heart-wrenching, emotionally charged tales of forbidden love. And turn on the notification bell to stay updated. Remember, the intensity of desire often walks hand in hand with the price of consequence, and every forbidden story carries lessons worth reflecting upon.